Awesome. So welcome to this going further with gradebooks in Excel. This is kind of a part two session. Um, a couple of weeks ago, I mean, probably about a month ago now, we did part one. That you find that recorded. And this is really a continuation. So the foundations that we built on in that, we're going to extend this evening in this part two. And you can find all the resources for this at the link here. So the cc.page/Excel gradebook 2. Just a little reminder, this workshop is going to be recorded. And so I'm Chris. I am in Montreal, Quebec, just kind of, just over the border, right, Damien? Just like a tiny 600 kilometers away.
Just a little
bit. So I'm on the unceded territory of the Ganagahage people. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. Yeah, that's me. So, Damien?
Awesome. Yeah, and my name is Damien. I'll be super happy to be kind of on the supporting side here. So if you have any questions, you can always just audibly let us know, or just type in the chat if we're in the middle of demonstrating something, and I can always let Chris know, or hopefully maybe answer you inside the chat. But I am based over in Mississauga, Ontario, neighboring Toronto. Some might say better or worse of Toronto. That's up to you. That's personal opinion. But we are there over on Treaty 13A, and I'm just happy to be here.
My understanding is that just Mississauga is the home of everything in Canada, because like you see stuff and it's like everybody just wants you to return stuff to Mississauga. That was how when I came to Canada I learned that Mississauga existed. Everything just said Mississauga right now.
Basically, yeah. Or we just want everyone to come here.
Okay, so I'd like to just begin by acknowledging that I'm located on the unceded indigenous lands of the Ganagahage Nation, and they're recognized as the custodians of the lands and the waters on which we're gathering today. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that unceded lands were taken without permission and have never been officially returned back to those nations. So Damien's located on a treaty. They were taken with permission, or there was an agreement in place, but the unceded lands there was never an agreement in place there. If you want to find more about the land that you're on, you can visit native-land.ca, type in your postcode or where you're located, and it's going to tell you all about the lands that you're on. So this session's brought tonight by the Cobblestone Collective, run by 3 awesome women, and you can find out all about the Cobblestone Collective sessions on the website there. There's a whole schedule of all the things that are upcoming, and a lot of it is completely free. So, I was going to say, there's another slide in there somewhere. So tonight's session is brought to you by Microsoft. So Cobblestone Collective are a Microsoft in Education global training partner, and we just want to give Microsoft a shout out for making this workshop possible. So they're funding this and making it free for you. So today's plan is to essentially go through some things that now you've got your gradebook set up and I've got something that's working. Well, now how do I take that? How do I improve on it? How do I make it better? How do I deal with some of those situations that I'm going to come across in my class where the thing that I've built, the thing that I've got going, well, what do I do with that? How do I adapt it as such? So we're going to look at duplicating sheets. We're going to look at how we deal with errors. We're going to look at how we can filter things. We're going to look at how we can use multiple formulas in one, and how we can use multiple terms. And by terms here, I'm talking about like marking terms or grading terms, not like, like an actual term, like a terminology term. The Microsoft Educator Center has PowerPoint and I are not getting along right now. I'm going to resort to my mouse, which may be hopefully slightly more accurate here. Okay, so the Microsoft Educator Center is packed full of different resources, different courses, and you can get your certified Microsoft in Education badge. And by taking today's session, I believe that you get enough credits for like halfway towards your badge. So if you redeem using today's code, and you can see that code on the screen there, then you'll have half of your credits. If you attended the last session we did, then putting these two sessions together should earn you your full badge. Right, Damien?
It might even give you the full credit of the course. It will just, on the actual website, it will say instructor-led course, as opposed to like a specific pathway or title of the course on the website, but it covers the same content. So it's definitely still valuable.
Awesome. Thanks. Okay, so let's start with our first thing. Now, before we talk about duplicating a sheet, we're going to talk about our template. Now, last time we did this, we did the same thing, and I'm just going to walk you through how we take our template and how we get our template into our OneDrive, because this isn't necessarily the most obvious process. So the first thing that you're going to, I don't want to give you any feedback right now. I don't want to answer your questions. Stop. No? No? Okay, great. So we're going to click on this link here, which I've already done, and that is going to open our template. Now, what I'm going to do in my template is I'm going to go to File, and then I'm going to choose to download a copy to my computer. So now I have my file hanging out down here at the bottom of my screen. So now I'm going to switch accounts into my Office account, and I am going to go over here to the Upload button, and I am going to go to my Downloads. I'm going to choose my Gradebook file that I just put in here, and I'm going to click Open. And now this is going to take my Gradebook file that I just downloaded. It's going to bring it into Excel, and now I have my file ready to use as my copy. So there's no way to really just like copy it. You have to download it onto your computer and then re-upload it again into your OneDrive. So for those of you who are in the session with us, we'll give you a minute to do this because we understand that this does take a little bit of time. So you just give us a shout in the chat there when you're good to go and you have this open with the view that I've got. So I'm going to throw that link back on the screen here for you. So
I also did put it in the chat, so you can also just click that link in the chat and it should open up the same way that Chris just demonstrated.
That's
hopefully
awesome.
that might be a little bit easier as well.
Thanks, Damien.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think Damien also has a link as well for some accessibility features in Teams. We're going to throw that into the chat as well. So if you need to use any of those accessibility features, you can find out where to find them.
Yeah, that's inputted right there.
Thanks so much.
The Alfred to your Batman.
It's always fun doing these. Like I like the dynamic that we have when we do these together.
Just gotta have some fun. Like I said, it's late in the evening. Either you're super energetic or you're not, right? So
right, exactly. Like I said, I was already explained to Damien that I've already experienced sensory overload today. So
yeah.
Okay, so let us know in the chat that like give us a thumbs up, like throw an emoji in there, whatever it may be. Let us know that you're good to move on. If you need some help on doing that, I can walk you through it again. But we're just going to give you a little time here to get yourself set up. And if you're watching this as a recording as well, like you can use this time here as well to get yourself set up. Download it to your computer, go to your OneDrive, and upload it. We need some elevator music to like fill the time.
Elevator, Jeopardy, anything like that.
I would sing, but that would be a terrible idea.
I remember once I was in a Teams call with a few people, and the only way that I think you can really integrate like a background music is like if you're sharing the screen, make sure you just share your audio, and then whatever, you just open up like a web player or Spotify, and then there you go. That's your that's your little elevator music right there.
So Karen, you can totally we're doing this tonight in Excel, but you can totally do this in another spreadsheet product. So you should be able to download this as an Excel file, pull this file into, in your case, into Google Drive, and then just convert it straight into Google Sheets. So yeah, you can totally do that as well. And a lot of the formulas are very similar between, like, there's a few different spreadsheet options out there. A lot of the formulas are very similar. Like, I think Lotus 1, 2, 3 maybe even came first, and then like Excel became king. So, you know, there's been some options. Okay, we're gonna move on. Let us know again if we can help you out. Damien's there if you kind of lag behind there. So the first thing that we're going to do, and I think this is probably one of the most useful things. So last time we looked at setting up our gradebook, and now we've got, I'm going to close this one because I'm going to be really tempted to edit that, and that's going to be really bad. So last time we had this one, and I've got this little tab down here, the one that we made earlier. And essentially what I want to do is I've set this up. I've got all my assignments set up. I've got my average over there. I've got everything ready to go. And now what I can do here is I can right click on this and I can choose duplicate. And what this is going to allow me to do is now I've set this up for one class. I imagine most of you teach more than one class unless you're an elementary school teacher, in which case maybe you want to do it for different subjects. So now I would have duplicate. And now you can see that now I've got enough for like, so I can rename this. I can come over here, right click on it, rename it. So this one could be like grade 9 drumming. Click OK, right? And then I can duplicate it again. Double click on it too, we'll rename it grade 10 math. So now you can add these additional sheets for each class that you teach. So you don't have to like start again from scratch. You don't have to highlight it all and copy and paste it. And you'll notice as well, this is not in here, but you'll notice that mine are different colors. And I do like to color code things. So if you right click on these, you can actually choose a tab color. And Excel has quite the selection of tab colors. And if these aren't enough for you, you can click on more colors and type in like hex codes and everything. Like, you can get really crazy here. I thought it broken up. Worked. So also another little tip here as well. You can also throw emojis in here. So you can be like, okay, I'm teaching math, so I'm gonna put in an abacus. Because, you know, have one of those lying around my grade 10 math classroom. And you can even throw emojis in there as well. A little warning with the emojis. They do make life more difficult later on. I'm removing this for now because I'm going to regret it later. But depending on what you're going to do, you can also put emojis in there. Okay. So that's kind of our little first part here. So duplicating a sheet and renaming a sheet. So you can double click on it, or you can right click on it and rename it. So I'm going to stop. I'm going to give you like a minute to go in there, go into your copy, duplicate your sheet, and give it a new name. Chris, I'm wondering now whether I made your day because I told you you could make it different colors, or whether you can copy it. I'm hoping it's because you can make it different colors.
It's like making colors is actually a surprisingly awesome feature. I remember when they added it into Windows 10 to change your cursor, and you can do same thing, all the hex colors. It just blew everyone away. Like, that's what everyone wanted. Simple stuff.
I find myself being I'm pretty visual like when I do things, and like today I was telling Damien we were doing an event in the school, and I was doing some stuff with the sound, and the mixer we've got has like color scribble strips on it. You can actually color them, and I'd like color coded all the different inputs into it, and then like you can see it straight away, and it's like it's such a useful thing. Like my folders I have on my computer, like I have them colored, and only the important ones, and then all the insignificant stuff, like even my labels in my email have got like little colors and stuff. Like they stand out, right? So I'm pleased that that little color thing, that color thing was a highlight. Yeah. It's the little things that make a difference, not
That's
the
it.
big
We can
ones.
wrap up and go home.
Okay, we're done. Let's go, right? Okay. So, from colors and making things look pretty to dealing with errors. So, this is one of the big things. This actually came up in our last session. This was a question, and I thought it was such a good question that I feel like it required more explanation and more description. So, what do we do if a student is absent? Like we don't want to give them a mark necessarily. We don't want to leave it blank because we're probably going to want to leave a note for ourselves to say that the student was absent. We don't want to give them a 0, which sometimes you end up doing because you want to put something in there, but the mark's not a 0. So like, am I giving them a 0 because they were absent, or am I, like, you know what I mean? Like we have these quandaries. And so what we can actually do is we can make it so that our formulas that we're using, instead of throwing a value with this like hash value, they will actually just return either an error of our choosing, or they just won't return anything. So we end up with a blank. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to use the formula if error. And the way that if error works is that we put in equals if error, we put our open bracket, and then we put the thing that we want to do. So our original formula in this spreadsheet was taking cell C4 and dividing it by the value that's always in cell C2. You'll remember from last time that the $sign is there because it's an absolute cell reference. So when we drag down our formula, it doesn't change C2 automatically, because if we didn't have that, that would be C2, and then the next one it would drag down, it would be C3 and C4 and C5. We don't want that. We always want it referencing the value at the top. So that's our calculation. So C4 divided by C2. And what we're saying is that, so now we've got a comma here, and then we've just got a pair of double speech marks. And what that's going to do is that's going to throw in a blank. Like, I'm just putting nothing. And I could put in those speech marks. I could put in letters. I could put in numbers. I could put in a sentence. I could put in an emoji. I could put whatever I want in those speech marks. But in this case, I just want it to show a blank. And the reason that I've chosen a blank is because when I come to do a calculation, the blank will count as nothing. So it just won't take that value into account. So if you've got a student who is absent, they never end up writing the test, or they never end up doing the assignment, well, they're not going to get penalized for not doing that assignment. It's not going to count as a 0, which it would in any other way. So the way that we're going to do this, so I'm going to go into my spreadsheet here, and you're going to see up here, and I think...
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. If we can zoom
Okay,
in.
here we go. So we're going to zoom in here. And what I'm going to do, I've double-clicked in my cell. I'm going to type in equals if error. I'm really sorry if there's anybody out there who's colorblind, because this is not colorblind friendly in any way. We're going to go down here. We're going to put a comma. Going to put in our speech marks, and we are going to close our bracket. We're going to hit enter. Now, immediately nothing changes because we don't have an error. There's nothing here that's causing an error. I could put in a mark of an 8. It's going to calculate 8%. I could put 45. It's still going to do that. It's when I put in something that's an error that now I'm going to get a blank. If I put the same thing in the cell below, I get an error message. But if I now take my formula, I have to zoom out. Oh. I was a little overzealous there with the zoom. Okay, and now I drag this down, go back up to the top. You can see now we can type in whatever we want in here. It's going to throw an error. Now you could even put a dash in here, so you could have some marks, right? And now we have something which looks, you know, relatively straightforward and not overwhelming. So that's how we use if error. So the if error formula itself, now that it's not on a background that's quite so, hold on, I have to, no, oh, apparently you have to zoom before you double click on the cell. There we go. So you can see we've got if error. This part here is our actual value. This is the thing this is our calculation. You can put any formula in there. And then this is our second part, which is the value if we actually get an error. So I'm going to come over here. And like you can see here, like this is the end result. So I've got my absent in here. So what I want you to do, try this out, copy down the formula. Let us know if you need some help. Again, we're going to take this a little slow. We're not going to rush through this. And yeah, let us know once you're done.
I did put the formula inside of the chat as well. If for whatever reason that might be a little bit easier just to copy that, put that, and then use that as a reference on a different screen. When I was trying this out, I personally, this was actually the hardest part of the whole presentation. That when I was testing this out earlier, which basically means from here on out it's easy for easy. But I essentially every time it didn't work for me, you'd know it wouldn't work because like it would still list the code in the D column, right? So it would still say if error and whatnot. It didn't automatically switch back to a 0%. So that might be.
You also might find as well. So another thing that often happens here, if you end up with that, is in formulas, the show formula option, and you end up with all of the formulas showing, and then you're like, what's going on? And it's this show formulas option up here that this is kind of unique to Excel. I don't think other programs have this show formulas button. But yeah, that one's hiding out there.
And what tab was that again? The show formulas?
So it was just one of the ones that we duplicated. So I've got, yeah. Okay, well, we don't seem to have any, anybody putting up a flag for help or, any fires over there. So we'll move on. So the next thing we're going to talk about is filtering. And I think sometimes, and it depends on what you're doing with your spreadsheet, but filtering is definitely one of those more powerful, kind of useful features. And where I end up using this is when it comes to parent-teacher interviews. And one of the things that we've kind of shifted towards is this idea of online parent-teacher interviews. And a lot of people don't seem to like them. I actually kind of like them. But what we've been doing is we've been inviting parents to come to the online parent-teacher interviews. In the past, it's just been kind of like a free-for-all. We'd open up the gym, everybody would have a table, they'd just turn up, right? And now I need a way to be able to go through and it's like, oh, well, these are the kids who maybe aren't doing so well, or these are the kids who have failed. And looking through a big list of numbers is kind of overwhelming. So being able to look at that like shorter list of values is a lot more useful, and you can do some other cool stuff there as well if you get more comfortable with spreadsheets. But how do we drill down into that list? How do we get that list smaller? Well, we filter it. And filtering allows us to essentially take our data and then to choose different attributes that we want to filter our sheet by. So we're going to say, well, we only want students who have got less than 60% in this particular column. So how do we do that? Well, we, first of all, and I'm going to walk you through this. So we're going to use a sheet that we've got here that is called example class. And I actually already have the filter turned on, so I'm going to turn that off. So I know that my sheet's a little small, but it's just going to make your life a little bit easier if you can see the whole overview of this rather than me zooming in and zooming out and zooming in and zooming out. So the basics here are that what I want to do is I want to highlight my data that I am going to filter. I'm going to come over here to the data tab and I'm going to click on the filter button. And what this is going to do is not work because I selected the wrong data. Because what I should have done here is only selected this data. Because my cells at the top are merged, it doesn't understand that there's a second column here. So I want to make sure I'm only choosing the data that doesn't have merged cells. So I'm going to go back up here and click filter, and you'll now see that now I've got a drop-down box in every cell, not just one. So now that we've got our filter applied, I'm going to kind of go zoom in and show you what happens in another part of this. So now we can see over here that I'm going to choose my overall average. And what I want to do is I want to display only students who have got less than 60%. So in Quebec, 60% is a pass. So I'm going to go down here and just show you how I got here. I clicked on the little arrow. I'm going to click on number filters, hover over that. I want less than, and then 60%, and then go OK. And now I can only see the students who have got a mark less than 60%. Wow, this dummy class that I've got here they're not doing that well. If this was my real class, I'd be really worried. What you can see over here on the side is that this goes 10, 12, 13, blah, 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 18, 20, 21, 23. The missing values are the ones that have been filtered out of the sheet. So these values now have been taken out. They're not being displayed. And you can see that a filter is applied here because there's now this little filter icon in this drop-down box. If you want to change what you're doing, you can go back in. You can change what you're doing. You can have above average or below average as your filter. You want to show all the students who are above average. You want to send out an email. Your child's doing really well. Like they're working above average. Like there's some really good uses here. Once I'm done and I want to clear my filter, I can just come here and click clear filter. And now I see all my data again. Okay, so let's just walk through this one more time about how we're going to do it. So what we're going to do is we're not going to zoom out that much. So we're going to just highlight from mark because we don't want any of those merged cells, remember? So we don't want to have any merged cells. We're going to click on filter. We're going to come over here. We're going to click on the arrow. We're going to go to number filters. I love these things where you have to get your mouse just right. We're going to go less than, and I'm going to type in 60%, and I'm going to click OK. And now you can see that my list reduced. So this is only showing me the students that are less than 60%. Okay, I'm going to leave these instructions on the screen here. What I'd like you guys to do is jump into that spreadsheet and give this a go. So remember, this is the blue tab at the bottom that's called example class, and it's going to have all that data already in it. Now, I think the filter's probably already turned on for you, so you might want to turn the filter off to start with by clicking on the filter button before you start.
And as for the instructions, it is found in the data tab, because I think we might have skimmed over that in the actual live example, but it's just one
Yeah,
of the
so
tabs.
I was already in the data tab, so which I know I say funny because it's just my British accent. So over here, we can find the data tab, and we're going to click on that, and then we've got a folder button right here. There was a discussion going on in our office at work the other day about how I say yogurt and whether it's actually legitimately incorrect. It caused a 15-minute debate about the correct pronunciation of the dairy product.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, instead of like daily crossword or Sudoku puzzles, you just do a little daily debate.
So what happened that now like COVID's here, like people can't go and do all the things that they wanted to do, right? Like it's nice to see things returning back to normal in schools or semi-normal. So okay, do we have any questions? No.
No, pretty quiet on my end so far. So I guess that means everything is going flawlessly. You are,
Yay, it works. That's
yeah.
awesome.
Thanks, Chris.
So you can do all sorts of fun stuff with these as well. Like there's like custom filters. You can filter by formulas. Like if you're like, oh, this is cool, like you can get really geeky with this. And then you can take filters even further as well, and you can do these things called pivot tables. We're not going there tonight, but pivot tables are a lot of fun. So there's a lot of stuff with filtering data and sorting data and arranging data and displaying data. Data's fun. Once you've got the data, there's so much you can do with that. So much you can do with that. Maybe I shouldn't get this excited about data. Can you combine filters with sorting the results? Do you mean, like, do you want to sort them based on the filter value? Like you can sort your data and you can sort your filtered data and that doesn't affect anything. So I think that's your question. So you could sort your sheet and then you can filter it, or you could filter it and then perfect. That's great. That's I do that all the time. I ask people a question. I'm like, I'm pleased that I vocalized this because now it makes more sense to me. So
And Chris, if you also want, you can always just hop off mute as well and ask that question too. Maybe that could also help out. I know I'm terrible at typing out my thoughts personally, so I always take that advantage. But looks like we're good.
awesome. Okay, so you should have something that I love that. So when people watching the recording and have no idea what's going on here, so Damien posted like a GIF that says "I eat data for breakfast," and it's got letters and numbers floating around in milk, which is amazing. So that just made my night. So now we should have some data that's clearly been filtered. So the example. Again, asked us to filter by 60%, and now we can see this filtered data. And again, like here's just a reminder: removing the filter is removing the filters super easy to do. So we go back here, and I can just click on the filter button. I can click on the clear button. That just clears my filter and leaves them in place to use again in the future, or you can just turn your filters off. If you just hit the filter button without doing anything, it tries to kind of guess what you're trying to do. A lot of the time, it doesn't guess very well. So I really would strongly recommend you highlighting the data that you want to filter before you choose to filter it. Okay, so this is where things get a little heavy. So kind of warmed up. Now we're going to talk about nesting formulas. We're going to get serious. Oh, it doesn't go full screen from the point that he...
It's a different button. You got to go into the slideshow tab and
Right.
then from the current slide.
Hey, is this an Excel workshop or a PowerPoint?
Yeah,
This is amazing. Okay, where do I go? Slideshow?
slideshow tab. Yeah, and then from current slide.
Oh, look at that.
There we
Thanks.
go.
Learn something new. Don't argue with PowerPoint on a Thursday night. So we're gonna look at nesting formulas. So when you think about a formula, like you probably think about a standalone formula. So like a sum or an average or maybe an if error. But what we can do is we can bring all those things in together. And like I thought about the types of situations that you'd want to use these in, and this one that you see on the screen here is probably one of the most obvious. Once you understand the basics of this, though, you can do some really powerful stuff with it. So you can start to, for example, take the first letter of a student's name, and then you can combine it with their last name, and then you can throw a period in there, and then you could, like, if you know if your email addresses follow a particular pattern, you could actually generate the email from just their first name and last name. You could take a list of their first names and last names, and you could generate a list of students' names, so it's just their initial and their last name. Or you could just have a list of their initials. Maybe you want data that's maybe shareable and doesn't have identifiable characteristics, so you could use their initials. You can do loads of stuff with this, and this is where the spreadsheet kind of starts to do stuff that saves you having many columns where you then use the response from another column. You're avoiding that. You're skipping over that stuff. So the one that we're going to look at here is we're going to average 3 columns, and then we're going to average another 3 columns, and we're going to add those 2 averages together. Now, I could have done like average of the 3 columns, and then I could have put plus, and then I could have the other 3 columns. But that wouldn't have really addressed our nested formulas. So what I've done is I've used the formula sum. Now, we don't have to be math geniuses to figure out what sum's going to do. It's going to add 2 things together, right? It's basic. It's going to take sum. It's going to add the 2 values together. So anything that's in those brackets is going to get added. So that means that our average is going to get summed, the summation, I think is the correct term here, of the average of B2, C2, and D2 with the average of E2, F2, and G2. Now, in our example, this kind of doesn't make sense, but you could use whatever cells you wanted in these 2 averages, because that doesn't really matter. Now, what's important here is you're like, he's lost his mind. It doesn't follow. He's got this red bracket right here, and then it's blue, and it doesn't look right. And what I've tried to do is I've tried to put the colors with the functions. So you'll notice that sum is in red, and we know that a spreadsheet formula must be followed by a bracket. So we've got our sum, our open bracket, and then all the way down here, we have another red bracket. And that's because everything for that sum function is in those 2 red brackets. So you're going to open your bracket, and then right at the end, you have to close your bracket. And then you'll notice the average is in blue. So average, and then we open our bracket, we do our stuff, we close our bracket. We only need to put an equal sign at the front. We don't need to include another equal sign after each function. And we separate our functions with a comma. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to use this to look at generating a link to email parents. And this is like, whoa, hold on a minute. I just wrapped my head around what was going on before. And this is, I find this really useful. Like, this is something I use, if not daily, like every other day. I'm like, sat in class, I'm like, oh, I want to email this parent. Click. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at using a a function called concatenate. And concatenate joins data together, and it's represented by an ampersand. And if you don't know what an ampersand is, it's these funky little looking and signs above the number 7 on your keyboard. Unless you have a French keyboard, I think they hide out somewhere else. It's very confusing. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at how we build this up. And you'll notice that we're using a function called hyperlink. We're using another function, the concatenate, which just has a shorthand of the ampersand. Okay, if PowerPoint will let me out, here we go. Okay, so you'll notice here in my sheet, zoom in, I have got already added here 2 parent emails. So I'm going to click in the link box, and I'm going to type in here equals hyperlink open bracket. And I'm going to start off with some text because I want my hyperlink to start with mail to. Because that's what tells my hyperlink, like you could type www here, this is what tells my hyperlink that this is going to be an email when I click on it. And then I'm going to put a little speech mark because now I'm done with my text. And now I'm going to put an ampersand because I want to concatenate some data together. I want to join that with the first parent's email. So I'm going to click on that. And now I'm going to put an ampersand. I'm going to put a speech mark. I'm going to put a semicolon and a speech mark. Now, the reason that I've used a semicolon is because your email software recognizes the semicolon as a divider between the email addresses. I think you can use a comma here too. Shouldn't really affect things too much, but email programs prefer semicolons. So we're going to put another ampersand because now we want to join that to the second parent's email address. And, you know, I could just call it quits here and be done. So I can close the speech mark and put a comma because if you look here in my hyperlink information, I need a link and then I need a friendly name. So I have to give it a friendly name. Now, a friendly name for me is link because it tells me what it is. Close my bracket and hit enter. And it's still there. What did I do wrong?
I don't think the second double bracket after the D4. I think it's just a comma.
Oh, yeah, look at that. Thanks. Thanks. Oh, you got my back.
I was sweated there. I was like, oh, I hope I'm right.
It's what happens when you do. But, like, this is the reality. You do it, and you're like, why did I do wrong? Why did I do wrong? You're going to go sit there and stare at it, and, like, it's not going to work. Now, when I click link here, which I'm not going to do because it's going to actually open up my work email, and then it's going to, like, put my work email out there for the world to see. Don't want to do that. When you hit link here, what it's going to do is it's going to open up your email with, in actual fact, you know what? I think it's not going to do that. It's going to open up a blank email. So you can see here that it's going to open up a blank email and it just has those email addresses in it already for me. Now, what's even more useful is if you don't have to type the subject line in the email. Because who enjoys typing the subject line? Nobody. Especially when you email what is like about, you know, Francesca in French class. And you've already got that data in your spreadsheet. So in our slide deck, it shows you here how we can actually take it down the bottom here and add in a subject line. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm actually just going to copy this and paste it in. Kids. Copy. And I'm going to go back up here, and I'm going to put this in after D4. Paste this in. So B4 is our student's name, and we're going to hit enter. And there's an error because I tried to cheat. D4 and, you see, here we go. Missed the speech mark. Pesky speech marks. Here we go. Okay. So now when I click on my email address here, we can see student in class, and there's our information. So good to go. Okay. So that was a lot of information. Both ways of doing this are on this slide. I'm going to make this full screen for you again. So you've got it there to refer to. We'll give you a couple of minutes to have a little bit of a play with this, try this out before we move on. Honestly, this is like one of the most useful things I do in a spreadsheet.
Chris, can you tell me again what you modified in this, just so I can post the right one? Because I think I copy and pasted it and I had that.
Yeah, the one here, this one's fine. Like this one works. I did it initially without the subject line, and then I added the subject line back into it. Like you could do it without the subject line. The trick here is anything that's text, like not coming from the spreadsheet, has to be in speech marks. And you have to have an ampersand between everything that you're joining together. So it's like text join to C4, join to the semicolon, join to D4, join, like you got to join it all together with a little ampersand. And I always like that, like you got this like crazy long complicated formula and it just produces link. So you have this nice looking spreadsheet and then people are like, oh, link, and like magic.
Yeah, that doesn't look as magical once you get into the nitty gritty of it, right?
Right, exactly. And like I did this for the first time this year, and I was like, why have I never thought about doing this before? It saves so much time, so much time. Because like I have all the parents' email addresses, like I've got all the data there. All I have to do is write a formula and click. It's great, like when you've got students who don't do well in a test, for example, and you can just go through and like click. They didn't do well, or you've got a student who got like, you know, like 95. You're like, oh, they did great today. Or like maybe they've been messing around in class and you just want to send a quick email like, hey, just checking in, so and so's, you know, been fooling around in class. You don't have to go look up all that information and find it. It's right there. Click send.
Yeah, I think it really plays well for everyone's executive functioning skills. Just having kind of a home for everything. And, you know, chances are you probably have those emails, as you mentioned, Chris, right? You probably have those parents' emails somewhere. But if you just compile it in one spot, it revamps your entire workday, really.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's. There don't seem to be any questions there in the chat, so let's move on to our final thing. Okay, so sometimes we're going to want to deal with multiple terms, and I've thought about many ways of doing this, and I'm just going to show you the easiest way that I do this. So essentially, what I do in mine when I do this is I come down here, I find my last assignment that I did in the term, I highlight it, I right click on it, I copy it, I click after the average for the first term, and I paste it in. Now, you can then just go down here and delete this, and then you can just keep duplicating it like we did the first time around. And it might seem really obvious, but I really think that this is the easiest way to do it. Like, there's probably like really, you could like take the whole thing, you could duplicate it, you could bring it across. It's just, it's more effort than it's worth. So when we start to think about like what we're doing here, now we've got one term. Well, that's fine. We've got an average. And then we've got another term. So now how do we do the math that then powers that, right? That now things become a little bit more challenging. So to calculate the average for more than one term, all we've got to do is we've got to think about what this would look like if it was weighted. So if you're more than likely, the province that you're in or state that you're in, if in the US, will already have like a standardized weighting for each term, or maybe your school district, your school board, or it predicts what's going to happen. So normally in Quebec, 20% is term 1, 20% is term 2, and 60% is term 3. Like, who came up with those numbers, I don't know, but that's the way it is. I suppose, 33.333 recurring would have been a pain in the backside to calculate. So somebody probably was like, there's got to be a different way to do this. 60% does seem extreme. So I'm taking my average column for my first term, and then I'm multiplying it by the weighting or whatever that term is worth. So in this case, it's worth 20%, so 0.2, because our percentage is on a scale between 0 and 1. We talked about this last time we met. Then I'm taking the average for my second term. I'm going to multiply that by 0.2 because that term's worth 20%. And then I'm going to add that to my last term's average, which is going to be worth 0.6, because when I take 0.2 and 0.2 and 0.6 and I add them all together, I get 1. And 1 is 100%. So all of these then add up to give me 100%. So we don't have like I could have made you a spreadsheet with like term 1 and term 2 and term 3, and it would have just been overwhelming. There have just been so many columns, it would have been craziness. So we're not going to kind of practice this one together. What I suggest that you do is like keep the slide tucked away for future reference, for the end of the term. Like in Quebec this year, we're only doing 2 terms. So gotta love it when you do special things for special situations. And so all of this kind of goes out the window, and we've got 40% and 60%. So, come the end of the year, I'll just take 2 averages. But it's going to depend on what you do. And maybe you're in a province that does semesters and you don't see the same class in both semesters. So this is completely useless to you. You guys do semesters in Ontario? Does it follow through? Do you see the same class in both semesters, or not always?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so I know like in the States, like sometimes they do like algebra 1 in like one semester, but then you don't have to take algebra 2 in the next semester, for example. So it kind of, they go off and do something else. I don't know, baseball. So so we have a template, like this template's there, it's ready to use. You can take it, run with it, as always. Like with our last session, we had one, here's one we made earlier. And you can use that, you can hack away at it. There's always going to be that template there. There's always that link that's in the slide deck. You can go use that. If you break it, just make a new one and play away again. And I think that's how you kind of have to go with spreadsheets. I'll also say that as you start to look at the more advanced stuff, kind of a Google search is your best friend. Like, how do I do this in Excel? And there's going to be 6,000 ways to do it. I will say that some of the more advanced stuff does only work in the desktop version of Excel and not in the web-based version. The web-based version is getting better and better and better, though. I think you can now write basic scripts in the web-based version of Excel, but you might find that some of the heavier scripts and things don't play too nicely in the online version. There's some additional resources here. If you're using points-based grading, there's a link to a gradebook there as well. There's some templates, a little bit of an introduction to Excel. Don't forget about claiming your code for today's session to get that fancy badge to put in your email signature. And yeah, we just want to give you a big thank you for coming tonight. If you need any help, so you go away and you start to think about what we've talked about, the things that we've done, you're like, oh, that was a little fast, or I wish I'd have asked this question, or maybe you were just listening and you weren't actually doing it at the same time and you're going to go away and try it out. If you need any help at all, send us an email at help@cobblestonecollective.ca, And even if the person who's like reading the emails doesn't know the answer, they'll send it to somebody on our team who does know the answer and get you the answer and help you out and make sure that you get the help or the support that you need to make these resources work for you. And we'd love your feedback. So please, there's a feedback link there in the chat. Please, before you say goodbye to us tonight, if you could fill out that feedback form, we would be really grateful.